today's video, I go over a step-by-step breakdown on how I was able to create over a $500,000 profit on a multifamily flip. Now, this was a property that I purchased with partners back in 2018 for just $540,000. Since then, we have sold the property for $1.325 million and created a profit of over $570,000. The best part is that this investment was actually purchased using the equity that me and my partners had created in two previous purchases. So we just rolled the equity over into this deal, so they didn't really have to put any money out of pocket to even purchase this property. Now, if you're new to my channel, my name is Koukun and I'm a real estate investor, and I run a real estate team that helps investors buy and sell investment properties. If you're interested in learning more, definitely check out the links below. And if you're interested in selling an investment property, check out the free guide I made on the top 5 mistakes to avoid when selling a rental property. This was a guide that I created, and I used the points in this guide when selling this property that we just sold. So let's start with the purchase of this property. So back in 2018, my partners and I owned 2 other rental properties, and we were able to do what's called a cash out refinance, meaning increasing the mortgage to pull out the equity. And we were then able to use this equity as a down payment on this 4-unit multifamily property. So this property was purchased for $540,000. So the down payment closing costs end up being around $140,000, which is what we were able to pull out from those 2 rental properties. So this property is a legal fourplex. So there's 4 separate apartments that can be rented out separately. And the seller actually purchased this property 6 months prior to selling it to us, and he only paid $480,000. So in a span of 6 months, the value had gone up by 12.5%. We were a little bit shocked that we had to pay that much over what he purchased it for, but we still saw it as a good deal. So we knew that it didn't matter how much money he was gonna make in a short amount of time. What mattered was if it was a good deal, we were gonna move forward on it. And at the time of purchase, all the rents were below market rent at around $3,700 for the building. And we knew that that was one of the ways we could increase the value in this property. Now, before we start on the cash for keys portion of this video, as soon as we purchased the property, within 2 months, one of the tenants gave us notice that they were gonna leave. Basically, there were 2 roommates renting the apartment together. One wanted to leave, and they were willing to end their lease. Now, these tenants were paying the highest rent in the building, so we didn't have as much of an increase when they turned over, but we still were able to bring up the rent in that apartment by about $200 after a small cosmetic painting to that unit. Now, the next apartment that we got vacant was the toughest one. When we were purchasing this property, the listing agent gave us the heads up, hey, this tenant was a real piece of work. It was not gonna be easy to negotiate or even do anything with this tenant. So my partners and I discussed, and I agreed to actually move into this unit. At that time, I was renting a home nearby in St. Catharines, and I figured I might as well, move into the unit. We were gonna renovate the unit prior to me moving in, and it was a place I could spend a couple of years before I figured out my next steps in terms of where I wanted to live. Now, this turned out to be a lot harder than expected. A few of the prior owners actually had tried to do the same thing, saying they were gonna move in, but were not actually gonna follow through. So this tenant knew the system inside and out. He knew how to get a lawyer through legal aid and defend his case, saying that the new owners weren't going to move in. In our case, I was actually moving in, so we got a paralegal ourselves. We went to the landlord-tenant board. I defended my case. I signed an affidavit saying I was going to move in. And it turned out to be a straightforward eviction. Now, even after the landlord-tenant board decided we could get vacant possession of this unit, the tenant simply decided that he was not gonna leave. But during this same time, we actually had a burst pipe that forced the tenant to leave. And eventually we were able to come to a settlement where we gave them some compensation in order to just permanently move out. Now, after we moved into the unit, about 2 years later, my wife got pregnant, and we decided, maybe it was time for us to purchase our own place and move out of this unit. Around the same time, I discussed with our partners, and we decided maybe now was a good time to prepare the property to sell it. Some of our partners were going to retire soon, and they decided, hey, if we could make some profit off of this property, it would help them to move on into retirement. So that's what we decided to do. Now, this is where I started to implement some of the techniques that I described in my top 5 mistakes to avoid when selling a rental property. One of the key ones is the cash for keys, which is used to avoid a situation which is selling a property with tenants, especially at under market rents. Now at this point, I was living in one renovated unit and the other 3 units were rented below market rent. The one unit we had recently rented when we took ownership, at that point had already now fallen a few $100s below market rent just because the rental market had been increasing. And we didn't really do a big renovation to that unit and it was time to do a refresh to that unit. So at this point, we started communicating with each of the tenants. We offered a cash for keys buyout. And for 2 of the tenants, we were able to offer around $5,000 and they were willing to leave. Now, the 3rd tenant was a single mom with 2 kids and she really wanted to stay in that area. She didn't want to leave and have her kids switch schools. And she was having a hard time finding a rental to move to. So we offered her actually an increased cash for keys up to $10,000. And we even offered for her to move from her unrenovated 2-bedroom unit into a renovated 3-bedroom unit, the one that I had just moved out of. She would sign a new lease at the market rent, but she would get this $10,000 to offset the difference in rent for about the first year, and she was okay with that. Now, once we had got the vacant possession, I decided, let me reach out to a couple of my clients if any of them were interested in purchasing the property prior to us doing the renovation, prior to us, improving the building now that we have the vacant units. We got one offer from one of my clients at around $950,000. Unfortunately, just with some issues between him and his JV partner, they weren't able to close on this purchase. But it gave us a sense, okay, this is what the property is worth without doing much work to it. Now, once that offer fell through, my partners and I decided, hey, let's go ahead and do a cosmetic renovation of all the vacant units. Let's bring it up to a good standard and basically make the property a turnkey investment that, someone could come in, buy it, rent it out, and not have to do a single thing. So we did all the cosmetic upgrades like kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, paint, light fixtures, and really just freshened up all the units. And we did a little bit of work outside, some patio stones, cleaning up the vinyl siding, and just bringing the quality of the property up to a good standard. This renovation ended up costing around $110,000, and we had initially spent $20,000 to renovate that 4th unit that I had been living in previously. So our total budget to renovate this entire building was somewhere around the $130,000 range. Now, this renovation ended up taking around 4 months to complete, and same as with any renovation project, the last 5-10% of the work ends up taking the most amount of time, and it just feels like it's so hard to finish the project just to get all those last details. But we wanted to make sure that the project was fully done and that the owners had a really turnkey property that they could purchase. Now, this renovation took a total of 4 months, and that's with us self-managing the project, keeping all the costs down by hiring the trades directly. And the last 5-10%, as with any renovation project, always ends up taking a lot longer than you expect. But we really wanted to complete the project and bring it up to a good standard so that the buyer would really be able to purchase this property turnkey and rent it out without having to worry about anything. Now, at this point, we got professional photos and videos done. We prepared the listing, got it cleaned, and listed it on the MLS. So we put this both on the Toronto MLS and the Niagara MLS. Within 8 days, we were able to get 4 offers, of which one was over asking, firm, no conditions, and with a quick closing at that $1.325 million price point, which was exactly what we were hoping for, and we had the property sold. So here is how we were able to make $572,610 of profit on this multifamily flip. So let's start by calculating our gross profit. Our sale price was $1.325 million. Our purchase price was $540,000. So our gross profit was $785,000. Now, after that, we deduct the cost of doing this flip, starting with our reno budget of $130,000, our cash for keys for $20,000, real estate commissions just under $60,000, and legal fees, closing costs, etc. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't include any carrying costs in this equation. We actually owned the property for 4 years. So in that time period, we were able to generate some cash flow, especially once I moved into the building and once one of the other tenants turned over. There was some cash flow that kept building up in the account every month. We didn't really pay it out to anyone. So at the end of the project, once the units got vacant, that money was able to keep the payments covered so that we didn't really have to put too much out of pocket. Now, after completing this project, I've actually decided not to do more like this. The reason is, here in the province of Ontario, we have a housing shortage. And fundamentally, even though this negotiation, the cash for keys, everything is done in an ethical, fair manner, The unfortunate reality is that they're eventually going to move into a unit that's going to be more expensive. It's not really my fault, but it's the situation because they've been paying under market rent and they're now having to pay the market rent wherever they move to. As a result of that, I'd much rather prefer being on the side where I can create rental apartments, whether it's legal basement apartments, whether it's constructing a new build duplex, whether it's, constructing an apartment building, whatever it may lead to. I'd much rather be on the side that creates apartments that adds supply to the market. I'm going to be charging market rent once I've created it, but in some way it's going to reduce this pressure that's building up in the rental market due to the lack of affordable housing. I'm still a firm believer of using the cash for key strategy when selling a rental property because I've tried to sell quite a few rental properties in the past that were rented under market rent. They were kept in a messy shape and the units were in need of renovation. Those sales did not go smoothly, typically much lower than market value, and it was, bad for the seller, bad for the tenants, bad for the new buyer because the new buyer was usually someone who would be moving in or find a way to get the tenants out, so they'd be kicked out anyways, and it was just a mess overall. So my preference is always, offer a cash for keys, something fair so that it sets them up for their next place. You get vacant possession, you prepare the unit so that it's easy to sell, and you get top dollar from the sale. So I'm completely okay with the cash for keys. On the listing side, as an investment strategy, I just prefer to be on the creation side versus the simply turnover renovation side of the investing equation. I hope you like this video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. And again, if you're considering selling a rental property, definitely check out our top 5 mistakes to avoid when selling your rental property. It'll be in the link below. All the best.